M8 at Anston Cross for a police investigation. Further south in Dumfries and Galloway, the A75 is shut from the Cuckoo Bridge roundabout and the Bloomfield roundabout following a serious collision. And the M180 in Lincolnshire is blocked westbound at the M181, the Scunthorpe turnoff, due to an ongoing incident. On the M11 in Cambridgeshire, the inside lane of 2 is shut northbound from junction 11 to 12 near Cambridge. A lorry's got a puncture. In Kent, north of Ashford, the A251 Faversham Road is shut at Bourton Alf. That's at the scene of an accident involving a car and a pedestrian. And on public transport, there are severe delays on the Elizabeth line from London Paddington to Shenfield and Abbey Wood due to problems with the signals. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
We won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Don't miss out as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. In a major speech today, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves says she's going to go further and faster to grow our economy. So let's look at her plans then, and I'm asking, did they win you over? And when it comes to reform of law and order in this country, I am all ears. A proposal now that instead of going to prison, criminals could instead go to work at Iceland, the supermarket, not the country. What do you think to that? Also, tonight, I want to ask you, get this, only 1 in 10 streets are litter-free. I think this is a problem, and I'm asking, do you think we've lost pride in our communities? And if so, how do we bring that back? Alongside me to get into all of that and more, my panel tonight, Ben Habib, the former co-deputy leader of Reform UK, and Aaron Bastani, the co-founder of Novara Media. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live and get you your 6 o'clock news headlines.
Michelle, thank you very much. The top stories. The Chancellor has backed the expansion of Heathrow Airport in a speech outlining her plans to boost economic growth. Rachel Reeves claims a new runway will connect the UK to the world and open up new opportunities, including creating 100,000 jobs. She also announced plans to create a European Silicon Valley by developing a so-called growth corridor between Oxford and Cambridge. But the Chancellor acknowledged the plans to grow the economy will not come without a fight.
I have always been clear that a third runway at Heathrow would unlock further growth, boost investment, increase exports and make the UK more open and more connected. And now the case is stronger than ever. So I can confirm today that this government supports a third runway at Heathrow. and is inviting proposals to be brought forward by the summer.
However, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Daisy Cooper, says the government are undermining growth.
Government has got a blinkered approach to Europe, which is holding back British businesses and undermining growth at the moment. If the government was serious about turbocharging growth in the economy, they would start with the commitment to renegotiate our trading deal with the EU this year and make sure that a bespoke customs union that works for British business is right at its heart.
Sir Keir Starmer was challenged over the government's plans for growth at Prime Minister's questions. Kemi Badenoch mainly focused on the Employment Rights Bill, repeatedly asking if it would be dropped because it fails his tests for delivering economic growth. The Prime Minister, in a reference to Liz Truss, warned Ms Badenoch she'd become the next lettuce, claiming the Conservatives left the economy in a mess. She accused Sir Keir of being anti-growth and of misleading the House.
It is business that creates growth. Our economy is built by entrepreneurs, risk takers, and the hard graft of working people. They know that you can't tax your way to growth. You can't borrow your way to growth. You can't legislate your way to growth. Other countries are serious about freeing business from red tape. President Trump is doing it in America. Argentina is taking a chainsaw to regulations. Even the EU is not going as far as this left-wing government. This bill will put us at the bottom of the pack. Add it to the jobs tax, the family business tax. It's no wonder wealth creators are fleeing Britain in droves.
The Prime Minister hit back, saying the Tory leader doesn't know what she's talking about.
Mr Speaker, I understand she likes straight talking. She's talking absolute nonsense. She knows, and anybody who understands anything about the bill or any employment law will know you can't start in the morning and go to the tribunal in the afternoon. Now, Mr Speaker, we know she's not a lawyer. She's clearly not a leader. If she keeps on like this, she is going to be the next lettuce.
In other news, pensioners and members of the Unite union are protesting in London against the winter fuel payment. They're calling on the government to reverse the recent allowance cuts. Unite says almost 6,000 of its retired members have had to turn their heating down this year, with a significant amount taking fewer baths or showers. 1 in 6 people have had to visit libraries to stay warm. Elsewhere, the King and Queen have welcomed hundreds of newly elected members of Parliament and ennobled peers from across the House of Lords to Buckingham Palace for a reception in the State Ballroom. The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh and the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester joined their Majesties at that reception. The Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition were also in attendance. And during the reception, their Majesties and their Royal Highnesses met the elected MPs following last year's general election and peers who've been appointed to the House of Lords following the coronation of the King and Queen in May 2023. And Buckingham Palace says Princess Beatrice has given birth to a baby girl named Athena several weeks prematurely. The royal was due to give birth in early spring and was told in December not to travel long distances. In a statement, Buckingham Palace said Her Royal Highness and Mr Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi are delighted to announce the safe arrival of their daughter. Mr Mozzi posted a tribute, calling her tiny and absolutely perfect. Those are the latest headlines for now. It's back to Michelle.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much for that, Tatiana. My name's Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, my panel, Ben Habib, the former co-deputy leader of Reform UK, and Aaron Bastani, the co-founder of Novara Media. Good evening to you, gents. Aaron Bastani's already won the programme tonight because before we went on air, he said to me, Michelle, have I got one button too low undone on his shirt? I mean, how do you even answer that question, ladies and gents? I love society and all the double standards because you wouldn't be able to ask a woman that kind of thing, or should I say a woman wouldn't be able to ask a man. I've said he's fine. Your buttons are
it's
fine,
strange. I think that kind of looks quite strange, but if I do this one, then it looks like I'm sort of like, you know, trussed up chickens.
No, if you do that one, I think you're going to look like you're getting suffocated or something live on air, and we don't want that. You'll be going red and passing out by the time we even get to debate number 2. So I think he's absolutely fine as he is. You have no such issues because you come with a tie, don't you?
It's all by design.
Yeah, properly dressed. I don't want to be rude, but in case you're listening on the radio, he is. Ben Habib properly dressed. He's got his tie on and everything. I like that. Not enough people wear full-on ties and all the rest of it these days. I've noticed that. If you go to a show at the theatre or anything, people used to get dressed up. Now
they did.
They just wander in wearing whatever it was that they had on throughout the rest of the day. Anyway, look, I massively digress. We've got lots of stuff to talk about tonight. Join the conversation all the usual ways. Email me gbviews@gbnews.com. You can go to the website gbnews.com/yoursay and talk to me and each of them. And of course, you can tweet or you can X me. Penny, a GB News member, thanks for that, Penny. You say you're so pleased that you're going to be discussing the litter problems in this country. She says, my area is an absolute disgrace, but you don't tell me where your area is. And yes, I do want to talk about litter. Some people might think that's a trivial subject, but absolutely, I don't think it is, because I think if you have litter all over your streets, if you don't value your streets enough to put your rubbish into the bin, then what does that say about pride in our own local communities? And how do we restore that pride? If we can at all, get in touch and let me know your thoughts. But of course, today it's all about growth. Let's listen to our Chancellor.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News.
That's not our Chancellor. That's a GB News. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was a giveaway or what. But look, I'll tell you what she was saying. Long story short, she was in Oxfordshire. She was giving a big speech at a Siemens factory. She's saying that she's going to go further and faster when it comes to growth. There's a whole lot of information, a whole lot of policy ideas that she's got, and I will get into them all in detail. But for now, broad strokes, Ben Habib, what do you think to her ideas?
Well, I absolutely support a third runway at Heathrow. I think that Heathrow is a diminished form of what it used to be. It's lost its position globally. And while I'm at it, I would also improve dramatically the road infrastructure into central London, so we can have the great and good of business and leaders across the world come to this country and go straight into central London.
Right. Hang on, so basically we're not going with the flow of my programme whatsoever. What I was going to do is a general response and then get into the policy details.
Okay.
But he's got straight into the policy details. So what he's talking about is, after lots of toing and froing, will she, won't she, she's now announced that, yes, she's going to back that third runway at Heathrow. Continue.
Yeah, but I think this is performative politics.
Right.
I don't think she's got a serious intention to build it. She knows that she can wrap herself in the cloak of desiring to grow, comfortable that actually all the processes through which she would have to go to navigate and deliver that runway will exceed the length of this Parliament. So she can say, I'm doing everything I want for growth, but actually I'm hindered in the process. If she was genuinely interested in growth, what she would be doing is reversing her incredibly damaging increases in employers' national insurance. She would be not passing the employment rights bill that's going through Parliament that is going to be so constraining for employers and therefore for productivity and growth in this country. She would not pass the rent reform bills, which are going to be so damaging to our housing market. She would ditch the notion that companies and businesses need to keep records of ethnicity, wage gaps and all that sort of thing. If they really wanted to go for growth, there are a million ways they can deliver it like that and not building a third runway. I support the third runway, but that ain't the way to go right now.
This third runway, and I wonder, if you do not live in London, do you care about Heathrow Airport? Because everyone's been waffling on about Heathrow Airport today, and if you're not in the South East, does it matter one jot to you? And people will talk about economic growth and all the rest of it, but of course another airport suggestion that was made today is about Doncaster Sheffield Airport. I personally, I've got to say, I am biased, I'm a northerner, I was more interested in that one. But Aaron Bastani, where are you on some of this?
Isn't it funny? People were talking about levelling up for years. We don't hear that term very often anymore, do we? We're talking about growth, and people are going to agree or disagree about various proposals, but what is beyond doubt is there is clearly a massive emphasis on the south and southeast. Oxford, Cambridge corridor, Luton, Gatwick, Heathrow. There are some mentions of the north, but on the one hand, Rachel Reeves is saying, I don't know what the word no means. We're going to say yes to everything. Well, you didn't say yes to HS2 going to Manchester. You didn't say yes even to the Northern Network, which was Rishi Sop to various parts of the north once that was cancelled. So it's less funding for infrastructure in the north of the country, seemingly more in the southeast, but the devil is in the details. We'll talk about that more. This train, this railway connecting east and west, Oxford to Cambridge via Milton Keynes, was happening anyway.
Well, this is one of the points. So she reckons this Oxford-Cambridge, so basically creating a British Silicon Valley, if you would like. She reckons that's going to add £78 billion to the economy by 2035. And you make an interesting point, Aaron, because a lot of this is not new. So this kind of obsession with Oxford-Cambridge, this has been kicked around for goodness knows how many years, proposed and then vetoed and so on. The Heathrow expansion, I mean, that extra runway, we could have built about 5,000 extra. No, we could, I'm
no,
serious.
quite right. No, yeah.
The amount of time people have been talking about it, we could have built a whole new airport.
Well, that's why I say it's performative politics. She can wrap herself in the cloak of growth, knowing that she's actually never going to do it. And things that she could deliver for growth, she's not doing.
Sadiq Khan, he is the mayor of London. We're talking about Heathrow Airport. He's come out and said, I remain opposed to the new runway at Heathrow Airport because of the significant impact it'll have on noise, air pollution and meeting our climate change targets. Ed Miliband, he wasn't even in the audience, I don't think, to even listen to this. Of course, he's opposed to this as well.
Well, it's very incoherent on Labour's part because, of course, they're not drilling for new oil and gas in the North Sea because of climate commitments. But if you are just about growth, then you would be doing that. So it's not really clear what the strategic thinking is, what the boundaries are. Then on London, look, Sadiq Khan is the mayor of London. His job is to represent Londoners. I think the majority of people under that flight path don't want a third runway. But the point is, of course, you have national government to trump the particular interests of local areas. I think as London mayor, it's perfectly reasonable. I would expect him to say what he's saying. I mean, for anybody who's been to Barnes, Stanley Tucci's patch, it is absolutely extraordinary. I certainly wouldn't want to live
But he speaks for all of London, Aaron, doesn't he? And the economy of London will benefit from a Heathrow that is another global hub.
I would be curious if there was some sort of opinion poll just for Londoners about Heathrow expansion. I suspect a strong majority.
I mean, I live under the flight path in Fulham, and it doesn't bother me at all. I couldn't care less. They started about 5 o'clock in the morning, the aeroplanes.
Is that because you're getting a bit old and a bit deafer?
No. I used to love it when Concorde came over.
Did you?
Because you had the wheels coming out just as Concorde came over Fulham. And I love the sound of aeroplanes. What's the big deal? I think we need... And, by the way, aeroplanes are much quieter than they used to be, including Concorde. What we've got to do is really go for growth. And you hit the nail on the head, actually, Aaron. If they really cared about growth, they'd ditch net zero and they'd drill baby drill. You know, there's someone across the Atlantic who's got the message.
I want to just play you a clip in a minute from a businessman that a lot of you will know, because one of the things that really interests me is this whole notion that so many people in government seem to think that it's government that somehow create the growth. I don't think it is. I think it's entrepreneurs, businesses, and I want to explore that after the break. But before I go to said break, let me just play you this clip from Michael O'Leary. You'll be familiar with him, of course, the boss of Ryanair.
I wrote a letter to the Rachel Reeves on the 2nd of December, calling on her, if she was serious about delivering growth, abolish APD. I get a letter back this week from some dopey junior minister, James Murray, who's the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury. He helpfully told me that actually the rate of APD increase is only going up by £2 for those flying short-haul economy. That is 1% of an average airfare. £2 is 1% of an average short-haul economy low fare. I don't know what an airline this dopey git actually flies on that has economy airfares of £200. But the £2 is not 1% of an average airfare.
Well, there you go. He's a very outspoken chap, is Michael O'Leary. And, of course, the fella that he mentions, James Murray, I think it was, he's not here to defend himself, and I guess that he would say he's not a dopey, bleeping git or whatever it was. But, look, he raises a very important point, does Michael, because ultimately APD, the air passenger duty, that's what he's talking about. The lever for growth, do you actually think it sits with government, or do you think it sits with business and entrepreneurs? And I want to explore that question after the break.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Lately, it's getting much better. The
people getting more educated in terms of overall well-being of the skin health rather than temporary aesthetic treatments. Because most of the treatments in aesthetic, it doesn't change the texture of the skin, it just gives like volumetric result or remove the wrinkles temporarily.
So what are the most popular treatments that people are after?
According to a statistic report, first is anti-wrinkle, then dermal filler, then energy-based device. Yeah. But lately, biostimulators also became very popular. And
what do you mean by biostimulators?
Biostimulator, any substance that can change the texture of the skin, or like it will lead to postpone the aging process, or proliferate more collagen, increase the elasticity of the skin, such as polynucleotide or exosome, or different vitamins and minerals in a form of mesotherapy considered as a biostimulator.
Turkey's a particularly popular destination because the costs are so much lower. There have also been a lot of horror stories about what can happen when things go wrong, even people dying from post-surgery complications. What would you advise people?
Choose as a practitioner or surgeon very carefully and never prioritize price over quality. This is your face after all, your body after all. And mistakes can be reversible. It can be irreversible, and sometimes it's not like a booking restaurant or hotel. It's a sensitive matter that can affect their confidence and skin and body for life. So they need to choose very wisely. They need to search what kind of methodology that particular surgeon, they perform the treatments. Are they using any safety tools?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry, Dewbs & Co, Tulsa, and Aaron Bastani. Ben Habib remain alongside me. Rita, GB News member, thank you, Rita. You say, Michelle, governments create nothing but hot air. And if we could bottle all of that hot air, we would be beyond minted, she says. I've got to say, I'm not sure. I agree with you, but I'm not sure we'd ever be able to bottle it. We'd be into the stratosphere if we could, wouldn't we? Anyway, look, Kemi Badenoch, she has been speaking out today. Let's take a listen.
I know the Prime Minister loves the legal profession, but he needs to stop being a lawyer and start being a leader.
We know she's not a lawyer. She's clearly not a leader. If she keeps on like this, she is going to be the next lettuce.
This lettuce thing is going to run and run and run. Of course, they're all about that Daily Star front page. But one of the things that Kemi Badenoch was saying is hammering home this point that it's not about essentially government trying to create growth. It's about entrepreneurs, business owners. And she was reflecting on kind of the employees' rights bill and about some of the changes to that and about whether or not that's going to be counterproductive to the growth that we need to achieve. You're an employer and you're an entrepreneur. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, I mentioned it when I started going into the runway thing. You know, if she wants to deliver growth, she shouldn't be doing this employment rights bill. And, you know, it's counterintuitive. When you protect employees' interests, it sounds great, but actually the protection of employees' interests comes at a cost to the employer. And in the case of this bill, it prohibits you from hiring and firing, firing and then rehiring, sorry. It requires you to give proper reasons for dismissing staff even before they've worked for you for a minimum period of time, and so on. And what the effect of that on an employer is that every time you consider employing someone, you're reluctant to do it because you fear the difficulty of all the associated costs and, termination that may come later down the road if it doesn't work out. And so what happens is you put a brake on employment. And what we've got is an over-regulated employment market. We need to actually deregulate some of the some aspects of our employment law so that employers can be more confident in employing people without fearing the effects of doing so.
What's your key area that you want to deregulate then as an employer?
Well, for example, I would have no requirement for giving reasons for dismissing someone. If you dismiss them, it used to be 2 years, they've now made it 1. I'd move it back out to 2. I would remove the requirement for companies to provide pensions. Let companies decide whether or not between themselves and their employees, that never used to be the case, Michelle. Pensions weren't weren't part of the regulatory framework. Pensions were something that you had if you could afford it in the private sector. And let companies decide how they remunerate their employees.
And it's a recent addition, essentially, to have this compulsory pension scheme. But the reason they brought that in was that a lot of people were not really paying attention to their pensions and then would be left without anything or minimal contributions when they retired and left to rely on the state.
But this is the creeping extension of the nanny state, isn't it? It's always taking a bigger step into our private lives, requiring business to do X, Y, and Z because the state it has a desire to run the economy. The state needs to get out, let business owners, entrepreneurs, they're not loaded. Most people who run businesses in this country are not loaded. They're running small shops and their own private businesses. Let them get on with how it works for them. They know how to do it. And, of course, the other big elephant in the room is taxation on employment, and we've just seen employers' NI go up. That is a prohibition on employment. Employers only have one reaction. There's one of 3 reactions an employer has.
I'm starting him off now, aren't I? I need to bring Aaron back.
Well, I'll just quickly say, when you raise taxes on employment, employers have 3 options, basically. Don't give people salary rises, which damages the employee. Don't hire more people, which damages the economy. Or sack people in order to make ends meet. All of that's damaging to the economic fabric. So the protection of employees, the protection of their tax take, is actually damaging the economy. They've got to understand that.
Aaron?
So we've had one of the most deregulated labour markets in Europe for a very long time. And actually, if you look at our productivity compared to France, the Netherlands, Germany, where labour regulations are significantly more onerous, they have higher levels of productivity. The French work less than us. If they work the same amount of hours as us, they'd have a higher GDP because they're so much more productive, about 20% more productive than we are. So this idea that necessarily you're less productive if you have higher labour standards, labour regulations, isn't borne out by the data.
I don't know where you get your data because
let me finish, because you can come back on that. Hold on one sec. We need to make life easier for businesses. Totally agree. Energy, too expensive. Rents, too high. We need to put more money in the pockets of consumers so they can buy the goods and services that businesses are selling. I just don't think it's that big a part of the pie. Pensions. Navarra, we have about 30 people on PAYE. It's not a significant problem for us. And the only other thing that Ben mentioned is about moving that dismissal from 1 to 2 years. That doesn't seem like a major...
No. They're bringing it down to no period of time.
Well...
So you hire someone and then you are stuck with them.
Well, as I understand it, the probationary period is going to be 6 months. And, and everybody out there who's watching, if a business has major problems and it needs to restructure to lay people off, you can restructure. I think fire and hire is awful. It's good we're getting rid of it. P&O obviously showed up that logic. It's very, very bad.
But what would you do? Would you rather see a business go bust than fire and then rehire? What would you rather do?
Well, that's not how it's used.
Well, it's used to reduce costs.
For instance, the Labour Party used fire and rehire, ironically. It's basically, if you want to reduce your cost base, you can restructure. The point is that fire and rehire, where you rehire the same people who do the same job for less money, is, I think, deeply immoral, particularly for a company which isn't facing insolvency. P&O Ferries wasn't facing insolvency. No, it's very profitable, actually.
DP Ports, the owner of P&O, was going to dump P&O if it didn't cut its costs. And P&O would have gone down. So what would you rather? An economic organism dies, or it has the ability to cut its cloth according to its needs?
All I'm saying is, if we're looking at this empirically, there are countries out there far more successful than us, higher productivity. They have labour standards which aren't, a million miles away, but they're significantly better.
I dispute that. I don't think the French, by any yardstick, are more productive than we are. Have you looked at the French economy?
France's output per hour is higher than the UK's,
including Germany's, frankly. Have you looked at Germany's economy? They've been in recession for the last 2 years.
So for people watching, productivity is output per person per hour worked.
Per hour, absolutely.
And it's higher than here.
Yeah, and we know that. We have the added complication of mass immigration. And the notion...
So does Germany.
The notion that
Germany had 1.5 million people in 1 year.
The notion that I need to check your figures because none of this rings true to me. The notion that we have laxer employment laws than Europe is just wrong because we were part of the EU, and when we left under the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, we entered into a non-regression agreement with the EU where we wouldn't reduce our onerous employment obligations.
Well, luckily for you all, you've got a break coming up, so you can check all the figures that you want. I do want to just say the Employment Rights Bill, because we're talking about firing and all the rest of it, what they actually say is they will give greater protection against unfair dismissal from day one.
From day one, exactly.
Yeah, but then they also say we're also bringing in a new statutory probation period for companies' new hires. Apparently, they're consulting about that. I'm not sure what that length will look like. Look, let's continue this conversation after the break when everyone's had a chance to check their figures. But I also want to look at the actor, Idris Elba. He says we could take the points off kitchen knives to try and stop people stabbing each other. Well, I don't mean to be rude, but what next? We're going to chop fingers off people to try and stop them creating a fist to punch each other. Aren't we focusing our attention on the wrong kind of area? And also, prison ideas about reform. There's some interesting ones. I'll see you in 2.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Looking ahead to tomorrow and across southern parts of Europe, there's quite a mixed picture. There is still some rain and even a bit of hill snow around, especially across northern parts of Spain into southern France. Elsewhere across Spain and Portugal, it's actually a bit drier and brighter than it has been recently. And similar across much of Italy for now, although there is some rain around and rain affecting Greece as well. There will be some further dry, bright weather to come as we go through into the weekend, with temperatures around or a touch above average for the time of year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good evening. I'm here with your latest Met Office weather update for GB News. It's going to be a bit chilly for many of us overnight, and with that there is the risk of some icy patches developing, especially towards the north. Meanwhile, further south, we're still under the influence of an area of low pressure which is just off the coast of France, but it is bringing some heavy rain to immediate southern coastal parts, particularly towards the southeast. A lot of that is clearing away though as we go overnight, and so for many it's going to be a dry picture with some clear skies. But worth noting across Scotland and Northern Ireland in particular, we are going to have some showers feeding in from the north, and with temperatures falling close to, if not a little bit below freezing, particularly in rural spots, that brings the risk of some frost and also some icy patches. The icy patches are going to be more of an issue across parts of northern Scotland where the showers are more frequent, and worth bearing in mind these showers could bring some sleet or snow, particularly over any modest higher ground. Also some icy patches likely across parts of Northern Ireland too, especially towards the north where we have some showers feeding in. A few showers perhaps for northwest England and also around northern and western parts of Wales, but otherwise, once that rain in the southeast has cleared through, it is looking largely dry as we go through into tomorrow morning. Then through tomorrow itself, again, lots of fine weather on offer, plenty of sunshine, just a few showers to watch out for, particularly towards some northern and western coastal areas, but most places avoiding these. And yes, just a bit of cloud bubbling up through the afternoon, but generally a fine and often sunny picture. That being said, temperatures around average for the time of year, so still a bit of a chilly feel to things. Later on, we will have a system coming in from the west that's going to push through overnight into Friday and lying across southeastern parts as we go through Friday itself. Behind that, though, a lot of dry weather following in, but it does look a bit cloudier than tomorrow, and so sunshine's going to be at a bit more of a premium. Into the weekend, and there will be a northwest-southeast split, with northwestern parts seeing most of the wet and windy weather.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems continue on the M8 in Glasgow. The eastbound exit slip road is closed at junction 19 for a police investigation, which also means that the Clydeside Expressway is closed just off the motorway in conjunction with that investigation. There are long queues on the M6 southbound in the West Midlands at junction 10, the Wolverhampton-Walsall turnoff, where the inside lane of 4 is closed. The lorry's broken down, causing queues back towards the M54. In Lincolnshire, the M180 is blocked westbound at junction 3, the M181, the Scunthorpe exit, due to an ongoing investigation. And the M11 is down to a single lane heading north towards Cambridge from junction 11 to 12, where a lorry's got a puncture. It's also queuing on the A505 coming off the motorway. And in South London at Thornton Heath, the A212, the White Horse Road, is shut southbound. A police investigation is underway. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry, Dewbs and Kurtles, 7 o'clock tonight. Good evening to you. If you're just tuning in, Ben Habib, the former co-deputy leader of Reform UK, alongside me, as is Aaron Bastani, the co-founder of Novara Media. We've just been talking about the growth situation. I really want to ask you, Stephen says, why does everything in this country seem to have to be built in or around London? You're asking that million-dollar question, what happened to levelling up? And this is certainly, as a northerner, one of the reactions that I had to all of this growth conversation today. It felt so obsessed with the southeast of England. It is infuriating because we do have a lot of talent and all the rest of it in the north that's just begging for some focus and some serious attention and investment. But look, I want to ask you today what you think to this. Actors get involved in everything these days, but Idris Elba, he's been speaking out today about knife crime. Take a listen.
Do think there is areas of innovation that we can do with kitchen knives. I hate to say it, not all kitchen knives need to have a point on them. That sounds like a crazy thing to say, but actually it would reduce. You know, you can still cut your food without the point on the knife, which is an innovative way to sort of look at it. And in a country in crisis, I'm sorry, but yeah, let's look at that.
I mean, you know, I don't want to poo-poo suggestions. I think it's very important. And I think the scourge of knife crime on our streets is appalling, and we need to do something. And a big percentage of these attacks, they are indeed done by kitchen knives. But I do wonder sometimes, when we're now focusing on rounding off the edges of these knives, I mean, I made a joke about it earlier on, but what are we going to be suggesting next? Chopping fingers off to try and stop fists being created to hurt people? Aren't we just kind of overlooking the key point that it's not the knife that kills a person, it's the person who's ramming it into somebody?
Absolutely. And if you... it's not like a gun, which you can use at a distance. A knife is something... If you're prepared to use a knife, you're already in close proximity to your victim. And if you're prepared to be in close proximity to your victim, whether you've got a kitchen knife or the end of a can that you've opened because it's got a sharp edge, or you've got a bottle that you've smashed and you can use that, there's no shortage of sharp stabbing weapons you can use.
I see that you've put some thought into.
No, I mean, I haven't. I've literally, you just asked me the question. But, if you're intent on doing that kind of damage to someone with a sharp instrument, there's no shortage of sharp instruments. It's the person who wields the sharp instrument that needs to be under control. And what we've lost control of is our criminal justice system, and dare I say it, also our communities, because our communities are no longer settled the way that they used to be.
Well, we're going to address both of those points in just a couple of minutes. But on this rounding off of the knives, where are you, Aaron?
It's daft. I mean, I agree with Ben. You might see young people all of a sudden with screwdrivers, and even more sort of ghastly than what we have. I mean, he's not wrong, technically, but as a widespread solution to what is clearly a very big systemic problem right now for the UK, I don't think it's sufficient, no.
The problem is, though, ladies and gents, we debate this issue, don't we, often about knife crime, and there is still this million-dollar question about what on earth do you do to stop people stabbing? And now it's got to the point where you used to see indiscretions and issues on the streets and you'd be straight in there trying to stop it. And now the first thoughts in people's minds all the time is he might have a knife on him. It is a million-dollar question, I suspect. It's a very complicated answer. And I hope and pray that someone actually comes up with that answer one of these days. We've just been talking about law and order. Prison reform and what that could look like is a hotly debated topic. Well, now criminals could be sent to work at Iceland, the supermarket bracket, instead of going to prison. This would be for your lower, your lower types of crime. You're not going to be shoving murderers in there, obviously. What do you think to this, Ben Habib? Is this a welcome suggestion?
Well, Lord Timpson, who rehabilitates prisoners who've come out, and work in Timpson outlets, I think that's fantastic, the rehabilitation of prisoners. But I think if you have been incarcerated, there's presumably a reason for you to have been incarcerated. Judges already have the option, courts have the option to give you community service. And if it was intended that you shouldn't be imprisoned, then it's up to the court to decide it. I don't think it's down to a failing prisoner, prison infrastructure that we should be releasing prisoners. Already, as we were saying, the criminal justice system is failing, and I think a significant part of that is that criminals think they can get away with crimes and they won't be incarcerated, that actually the criminal justice system can't cope with them. And so they'll be back on the streets even if they do spend a short period of time in jail, unless, of course, they're in jail for, hate speech, in which case they could be there for a long, long time.
The Director of Rehabilitation at Iceland, he's written to James Timpson, and he's an ex-offender himself, I've got to say. And what he actually explains is, look, if you've committed a low-level crime, instead of sending these people to prison, if it all goes well, then what happens is you go into work at Iceland, you wouldn't go to prison. He goes on to explain, you wouldn't then lose your home, your kids don't go into care, and if it all goes a little bit pear-shaped, then you would revert to your suspended sentence back in prison. What do you think to these ideas?
Well, I find it rather strange that you've got communications from the chief executive of Iceland to effectively somebody who's representing the government, Lord Timpson, who's looking at ways to oversee justice for women's country. And he's effectively lobbying for, I don't know, is this going to be a form of cheap labour? Are these people going to be paid? Are they going to be getting the living wage?
Is it exploitative? Is it a way of getting around the Employment Rights Bill?
There you go. By the way, he's a Labour supporter. So, is this just probation for private companies so they can access ultra-cheap labour? If it is, that is absolutely outrageous, and it's obviously going to undercut the wages of people in the labour market. So, I'm all ears when it comes to thinking out the box. But just quickly on the knife thing again, and it fits with this, Axel Rudakabana literally told Lancashire Police when he was 15 that he wanted to kill people and he had a knife on him. He had a knife and he said, I want to kill somebody. Nothing happened. So if you have a situation like that where somebody can have a knife with them, say they want to kill people, say they want to generate poisonous substances to kill people too, who was found with ricin, or ricin was found in his home, and nothing happens, then we can talk about people going to Iceland or M&S or Tesco or Sainsbury's. It doesn't matter. If the police aren't doing the bare essentials of monitoring situations of that effectively, this is just nonsense, frankly. It's pointless.
One of the other ideas that James Timpson has got, and I've got to say, I quite like James Timpson. I think I actually quite do. He and his family, I mean, when you're bored, look into the Timpsons brand. I've got a lot of respect for them. They do a lot of good with kids in care and stuff. I actually do. I like him and his broader family. Anyway, he has also now been talking about women and women prisoners, and he's explaining that he's chaired the first Women's Justice Board, and what he wants to do is look at how you steer women away from a life of crime. He's saying that many women in prison are victims themselves. He goes on to say that more than half of these women are mums, and prison often fails to address what lies behind their offending. And then it kind of goes into explore, should women criminals be treated differently to male criminals?
So when you go to court on a criminal charge, the judge takes all the circumstances of the crime into consideration, the motive, the circumstances, and so on. And it's for the judge to decide what the appropriate sentence should be, or for the judge to decide what the appropriate sentence should be. And it is not for us to now start putting protected characteristics around certain people in society and saying that they need a softer touch form of justice because they're women. The minute we do that, we will then be putting a protective status around ethnic minorities, people from transgender backgrounds, and so on and so forth. Justice has to be blind, and Sadly, it isn't blind anymore in this country. Justice is two-tier in this country. And what we've got to do is get back to justice being blind. It doesn't matter who you are, where you came from, what your sex is, what your ethnicity is, whether you're rich or poor. If you do a particular crime and the circumstances are such that that crime requires a sentence of X years, then you should get X years. That's it.
Well, he does go on to say, so his ambition is to get to the stage where they can close one female prison. He says that there's a number of women that need to be there because they've done bad things and need to be punished, and that's the best place. But then he goes on to say there's lots of women that are very ill. He talks about the fact that half of them are mothers, the impact on their kids is absolutely massive, and so on and so forth. There's conversations about them perhaps instead being sent to almost like rehabilitation centres where they would get therapy, support and all the rest of it. Where are you on this?
Well, I disagree with Ben. I agree that obviously justice should be blind, but we also, as people involved in publicly funded prisons and a publicly funded criminal justice system, have to be aware that the social costs of incarcerating women are just significantly higher than men because, like you say, 50% of them are women. I cast my mind back to that woman who lied about how far she was with regards to her pregnancy. She managed to procure certain pills from
I remember that story.
And she went to prison. Now, I think what she did was morally bad, but I think the sentencing of sending a mother, I think she was a mother of 3 or 4, to prison, when you think that therefore means that 3 or 4 kids don't have a mum for several months, I mean, that might create all kinds of chaos and social costs down the road, which, by the way, the taxpayer's going to have to foot. So I think it's quite a laudable aim to say, actually, we want to close one female prison out of how many the prison estate has, I think 12, something like that. That seems quite reasonable to me.
I remember the case very well that you refer to, Carla Foster.
That's right.
If my memory serves me right. And all these women were arguing that it was inhumane to have sentenced Carla to prison because she's already a mum, and I strongly disagreed with that. That was a woman who lied. She deliberately lied about how advanced her pregnancy was in order to essentially kill her child. If that baby had been born and then that mother had then, I don't know, smothered that baby outside of the womb, she'd have been done for murder. So how can you then deliberately lie and deliberately kill your child when it absolutely could have viably survived without you outside? That is, what do you call it?
Infanticide.
Yeah, infanticide, that's the word. So I absolutely do believe you cannot have a system where women actually think that they can do that and escape punishment just because they've already...
No, she'd still be punished, but the point was she went to prison for 3 or 4 months. I think she had 3 children. She had a significant number of children. And the point is, A, you're not just punishing her, you're punishing them.
But
B,
Aaron,
there are significant... The
moral of the story is, if you don't want to be separated from your kids, if you don't want to cause your own kids harm by you being removed from their life, guess what? Don't commit crime.
But the kids are being punished. I don't care about her not seeing her kids.
But where it leads, Aaron, where it leads is that women will have kids when they want to do crime. They'll go, well, I have a couple of kids, then I can do as much crime as I want and I won't go to jail. Or, for example, a man will self-identify as a woman, so I'm a woman, so you've got to be more lenient on me. And because we can't identify the difference between men and women nowadays, we'd have to be more lenient on men. I mean, the whole thing is just absurd. Justice has to be blind.
Look, as women, and by the way, that Carla Foster, she had a sentence halved in the end. She was released and then it was suspended. That was how that one ended up. But as women, look, we fight for equal treatment, and we've got to be very careful that what we're actually not fighting for is some form of special treatment.
Absolutely
when
right.
things don't go our way. I don't want to see women in prison. I don't want to see children separated from their mummies. But there is a simple way to avoid this, and that is women do not commit the severity of crime that would perhaps see you locked away. Or maybe I am just simplifying things. You'll have very strong opinions on what you've just heard. Get in touch and tell me after the break. Only 1 in 10 streets and parks are litter-free. This concerns me, and I'm asking, do you think this is symptomatic of a decline in pride when it comes to our communities? If so, how do we fix that?
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
I'm really pleased to see this story. It's the news that bowel cancer screening, the age for that is going to be dropped from 60 to 50. And this is really, really important because bowel cancer is one of the biggest killers, and more people appear to be getting diagnosed with bowel cancer in their 50s. Not entirely clear why. And there was an inspirational woman called Deborah James who I actually met when I used to be the Shadow Health Secretary, and I remember meeting her when she had her cancer diagnosis and supporting her campaign, and she sadly passed away a couple of years ago, but it was a phenomenal campaign, and I think did inspire the nation. And this is so important. So people in their 50s are going to be sent these kits in the post. And I suppose my plea is just do not ignore these kits, because you can deal with cancer if you catch it early enough.
Yeah.
So
I mean, this is not the most pleasant thing to do, and a lot of us aren't used to it and talking about it and whatever, but it is essential, obviously, to do.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And the other reason I wanted to sort of flag this is, I mean, we can sometimes make ourselves sort of pretty miserable looking at the newspapers, but this is undoubtedly a good initiative that the government have done this, and that campaigners have persuaded the government to do this. So, look, I just want to plea to everybody watching, if you get one of these kits, use it.
And, of course, I think it's really important within that to point out that this would not have helped Deborah, because Deborah was 40 when she died. And what's really important when you see stories like this is to pay attention to what your body is telling you. And if you have symptoms that are weird, it is important to go to your doctor and to talk about them and to take the tests.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, Dewbs and Kirtle, 7, Ben Habib, Aaron Bastani alongside me. Honestly, we just continued that conversation about women and whether or not they should be able to be locked up. There's lots of very strong opinions on this. Mark says the majority of women who go to prison are not good people. You can't say that they are the fairer sex and treat them differently. Don't be a hypocrite, he says. And someone else says women should be treated exactly the same as men when it comes to crime. If you wanted equal rights, you cannot pick and choose when you wish those equal rights to be applied. That conversation will rumble on and on. But get this, ladies and gents, just 1 in 10 British streets and parks are litter-free. I wanted to explore this because it's not necessarily about a crisp packet here and there. It's about when you hear statistics like that there are pretty much no clean areas now in our country, it makes me think, are we just losing pride in our communities now?
I think we are losing pride in our communities. We're also economically very challenged, of course. You know, local authorities lost £2.5 billion in 2024 in aggregate.
Ben Habib, that doesn't stop you putting your own crisp packet in a bin.
No, but it does prevent local authorities from having, you know, regular bin collections and all that sort of thing. And that bill, by the way, that deficit is forecast to increase to £9.5 billion
but there's a difference
in
between
2026.
refuge and litter, isn't there? If someone's got their bin and you've got your bin bags in the corner of the street or whatever, that's very different to what I'm talking about, which is individuals having such a disregard for their street and whatever that they're chucking stuff out the car windows, they're finishing a drinks can and just lobbing it on the floor.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, that sort of behaviour is symptomatic of people who've abrogated responsibility, who don't really take personal agency and their own responsibility seriously. And again, I think that in turn is symptomatic of ever-creeping state control. We expect the local councils to do everything. We chuck the stuff out of the window of our car because we think The road authorities will pick it up. We chuck it on in the parks because the parks policeman or whoever cleans the park will pick it up. There's a complete absence of people now doing stuff because they are individuals, they make decisions, and they're responsible, and they should therefore do the right thing. And of course, the best example of this was lockdowns, effectively the state stepping in and protecting the entire country and taking away responsibility from individuals for their own medical care. And so we're going to see more of this, I'm afraid.
One of our GB News members says what we need is community service litter picking. We need some sort of Pride in the UK adverts, he says, of the non-rainbow variety. Aaron Bastani.
So probation, I think, has been outsourced. I think Serco run it. The first thing you want to do if you want to do something like that, bring it back into public control, public ownership, dovetailing with local authorities, ideally. I really care about this stuff, and I'm on the left. I think the state can be good for some things. Ben and I disagree on that. But whenever I walk my dog, I always pick up, my wife really has a go at me because I don't have gloves sometimes, 5-10 bits of litter, because it really angers me. And one thing that I think not enough people are aware of when it comes to things like graffiti, and there can be great street art, but I'm talking about tags. Tags, you look at paving stones, which aren't, they don't even match because the local authority doesn't care, that rubbish everywhere. We demand that young people care about their community, that they contribute, that they keep it clean, that they play by the rules. But when you're a young person surrounded by squalor and filth and nothing is maintained properly, that impacts you. You think, well, why should I care about my town, my city, if it looks like this? Why should I have pride in it? And it creates this awful circular logic. So as somebody on the left, sometimes other people sort of criticise me for it, I think little things like this really, really matter. And I think it's a shame, actually, that Labour haven't been more attentive to it. We were talking about productivity a little while ago. We can talk about Heathrow and all this stuff. 4G doesn't work in central London. I literally can't get phone signal in central London.
You're right.
The little things.
First world problem.
No, but that's a big thing.
He can't get his 4G.
No, but my phone doesn't work.
London.
You can go to the third world and you get 4G. You don't get it in London.
Well, your call cuts out on a train, right? Little things like that. And I would really love for government to get on top of little things like this. By the way, this isn't a little thing, but it's something that we should be on top of, which is, our streets looking like
But can
rubbish.
I venture an opinion?
You may.
I think I'm suspecting you had a good familial infrastructure as a child, and you were brought up to believe that you have a duty to clean your own mess up, that you have to take personal responsibility for it. And that's why you do it. I do it too. When I see, people will put their little dog poo into a plastic bag and leave the plastic bag on the pavement. I think, well, you've gone to all the trouble of putting it in a plastic bag and then you leave the plastic bag. So I'll pick it up and I'll put it in a bin. But that's because my parents brought me up to be responsible for myself.
True.
And what we've got to do is give that responsibility back to people. And it comes back to another point you said, Aaron. We're going to be in violent agreement in a second. We've got to protect and promote families, communities, and the nation state. We've got to believe in ourselves. We've got to have pride in ourselves. We don't have that anymore because we've got an ever-interfering state. And I agree, there's stuff the state can do. For example, protect us from military invasions. But they've got to take their tentacles out of our family lives.
Well, there you go. Lots of you getting in touch and saying we need a return to community litter picking, but lots of you also saying you wouldn't feel safe, though, going out and about in your community to actually do that. B, she says, I grew up in Australia, Michelle. There used to be on-the-spot fines, heavy advertising campaigns about littering and so on and so forth. I do think we need to go back to basics. Teach your children to take your rubbish home with you and start trying to restore some pride in our once beautiful country. But look, that's all I've got time for. Thanks, gents. Thanks to you at home. Have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow night.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. I'm here with your latest Met Office weather update for GB News. It's going to be a bit chilly for many of us overnight, and with that, there is the risk of some icy patches developing, especially towards the north. Meanwhile, further south, we're still under the influence of an area of low pressure, which is just off the coast of France, but it is bringing some heavy rain to immediate southern coastal parts, particularly towards the southeast. A lot of that is clearing away, though, as we go overnight, and so for many, it's going to be a dry picture with some clear skies, but worth noting, looking across Scotland and Northern Ireland in particular, we are going to have some showers feeding in from the north. And with temperatures falling close to, if not a little bit below freezing, particularly in rural spots, that brings the risk of some frost and also some icy patches. The icy patches are going to be more of an issue across parts of northern Scotland where the showers are more frequent, and worth bearing in mind these showers could bring some sleet or snow, particularly over any modest higher ground. Also some icy patches likely across parts of Northern Ireland too, especially towards the north where we have some showers feeding in. A few showers perhaps for northwest England and also around northern and western parts of Wales, but otherwise once that rain in the southeast has cleared through, it is looking largely dry as we go through into tomorrow morning. Then through tomorrow itself, again lots of fine weather on offer, plenty of sunshine, just a few showers to watch out for, particularly towards some northern and western coastal areas, but most places avoiding these. And yes, just a bit of cloud bubbling up through the afternoon, but generally a fine and often sunny picture. That being said, temperatures around average for the time of year, so still a bit of a chilly feel to things. Later on, we will have a system coming in from the west that's going to push through overnight into Friday and lying across southeastern parts as we go through Friday itself. Behind that, though, a lot of dry weather following in, but it does look a bit cloudier than tomorrow, and so sunshine's going to be at a bit more of a premium. Into the weekend, and there will be a northwest-southeast split, with northwestern parts seeing most of the wet and windy weather.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Problems in Glasgow on the M8. The exit slip road on the eastbound side is closed off at junction 19 at Anston Cross, where a police investigation is underway. Clydeside Expressway is also closed just off the motorway as a result. And in South Lanarkshire, the M74 is partly blocked southbound from junction 2 to 2A. So this is just to the east of Glasgow at the scene of an accident. In the West Midlands on the M6, the inside lane's closed southbound at junction 10, the Wolverhampton-Walsall exit, where a lorry's broken down. In Lincolnshire, the M180 is partly blocked westbound at junction 3, the Scunthorpe exit due to an ongoing investigation. And on the western stretch of the M25, the two outside lanes are closed off clockwise just before the M4, where a car's broken down. And on public transport in London, there are severe delays on the Elizabeth line due to problems with the signals. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
We won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Don't miss out as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2.